Back, you have a seat. One second. Folks, you can't stand. They're going to have to go out in the hall. Closed argument. Mr. Whitesell.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'm going to tell you right off, I can't stand over here. When I'm talking to you, I won't be in front of you. So I'll move around a little bit, and I apologize if that's annoying to you. And while I'm apologizing, I want to apologize to you for several things. Like the other lawyers, I want to thank you for stepping forward, and I believe we did that in Chattanooga. But I want to apologize to you the fact that you've had to be away from your families. I know that's been hard, and you work, and yesterday being Mother's Day and all, I know that was difficult for you. And I want to apologize to you that we've got almost 200 exhibits in this case. And I can't remember which day it was, whether it was Wednesday or Thursday, but I felt like I'd run a marathon between the podium and the clerk's table over there putting all those pictures in. And I want to apologize to you that some of the evidence that we put in this case, at the time you're probably wondering why we did it, and right now you're probably wondering why we did it, and I am too. And I'm going to give you an example of what I'm talking about. We spent a great deal of time trying to show that on the weekend of February the 7th or 8th, or excuse me, January 7th, 8th, or 9th, or whatever, that Miss Stewart and Mr. Anuna were in Lafayette, Louisiana. And therefore there couldn't have been this meeting about Mr. Anuna being at the apartment. And if she ignored her phone calls from the apartment manager, it was because they were out of town. And as it turns out, we're not sure when that meeting took place. I'll agree that it did take place, but that's an example. And when we put on the proof in a case, we have to anticipate things, and we may not be sure. So if we have put on any proof that really, as it turns out, didn't matter, I apologize to you for that. But I don't want to apologize, and I won't apologize for trying to give you all the evidence in the case. And having said that, I want to apologize for anything that I have done personally that may have offended you, or anything that I may do in the next few minutes. Now I'm going to put this picture up here, exhibit number 1, and this is a picture of Tina Stewart. And I want to get one thing clear right now. I'm not asking you to look at that picture, and I'm not trying to ask you to have sympathy. I don't need to ask you to. Everybody in this jury seated here is a human being, and if you weren't a human being, that would be one thing. But as a human being, you all have sympathy. You all have sympathy for the family of Miss Stewart. And you know what else? I think you have sympathy for the family of Miss Madden too. It's a terrible, terrible situation. And the judge didn't tell you that you can't have sympathy. But what the judge said is you can't base your verdict on sympathy. And that's all we can put up here. Now, Mr. Brandon wanted to say that we have some ulterior motive, but he didn't mention that you've had a week now the opportunity to look at Miss Madden. He didn't mention that you had the opportunity to see her on the witness stand, where she over and over and over and over again got to apologize, to the point that rather than asking the questions I would answer, she gave the same answer all the time. I'm sorry, I wished I'd done more. You got to see that. Now, what was that purpose? What was the purpose of her giving that answer instead of answering the questions, if it wasn't to elicit an emotional, sympathetic response from you, the jury? You know, And I mentioned yesterday was Mother's Day, and I have a daughter, and her husband and she have a 2.5-year-old grandson. My wife and I are plotting how to get him away from him. We hadn't done that yet. And she's going to have twins in about 3 weeks. And so we got to visit yesterday. And you know, the thing I've heard my wife reading nursery rhymes here lately. And nursery rhymes have a lot of good information and messages. Some of them have a lot of truth involved, and I couldn't help but remember this one. Humpty Dumpty sat on the wall. Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men could not put him back together again. We can't bring Tina Stewart back. We can't. Mr. Newman told you that. Mr. Brandon told you that. You all know that. And there's something else I want you to think about. All the king's horses and all the king's men, what that implies is all the power of the king or the king's armies, or as Mr. Brandon likes to refer to us, the government. We're not the government. We represent the state of Tennessee. But all of that power could not prevent Tina Stewart from being stabbed to death. Now, since we're talking about power, let's think about this. Is there any doubt in your mind that she was a Division I athlete? We've heard that phrase over and over and over again. Is there any doubt in your mind that she was a great basketball player, a great athlete? That was stressed to you by Mr. Brandon during his closing argument. Was there any doubt in your mind that she met Mr. Anunu in the weight room and that she was strong and worked out with weights? That was what he was trying to convey to you. Is there any doubt in your mind about that? And is there any doubt that being a strong, physical, speedy athlete, that she could not prevent herself from being stabbed to death by Miss Madden? He wants to tell you that Miss Stewart his word was whooping her. Where's the proof of that? Now, I'll tell you where the proof is. The proof is from Miss Madden. That's it. Miss Reese, she says she heard an altercation. We'll agree. Everybody agrees there's an altercation. But what was the nature of it? Who was doing what to who? Who walked out of that room? Where are the pictures of the injuries to Miss Madden? We know about her eye. That's some problem that she has because of her glasses being broken. Being broken back in November or December, or wait just a minute. Or were they lost, as her mother testified some few days before? Were they broken or were they lost? Was it November or was it February? How bad are these headaches? We don't know. No medical proof whatsoever. We only have the word of Miss Madden that her eye was hurt. Being pounded on the head. Where's the proof of that? Other than what Miss Madden said. And then think about this. Mr. Brandon stood up here, and if I recall correctly, he even showed that something like this, that her hair was being pulled. Where's the hair that the officers found when they searched that room? Where's the proof that she was ever bent over like this? Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard story after story after story from Miss Madden. And even after we had seen and heard from Miss Reese that she told her, she cut me and lied about what had happened to her. Even when we saw her at the police station talking about a black male with dreadlocks that doesn't exist. She even lied to that person, by the way, when she told us that Tina Stewart told him that Tina Stewart didn't live there. Made up an imaginary person and then even lied to the imaginary person. And then when Detective Taylor convinced her that it was an unbelievable story, she tells another. And then after she tells Detective Taylor that story, she writes another one. And then after those stories, she comes in and takes this witness stand under oath and tells another one. And then after that, her mother testifies, and lo and behold, we find out that she's told her mother another one. All different. And then I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, based on the closing argument that you've just heard from Mr. Brandon, we've got another one. Think about this. Not only do we not know which story is accurate, and I told you this last Tuesday. I said, even after this case is over and all the truth is in, you will have unanswered questions. And you do. Wouldn't you like to know why that bra's in the dumpster? Wouldn't you like to know that? Who could have answered that question for you? And when asked, the response was, I'm sorry I did it. I should have done more. Who could have told us about that? Wouldn't you like to know how that knife blade got broken? Who could have told us that? Wouldn't you like to know when the clothes were put in the dryer, taken out of the dryer? Wouldn't you like to know where Miss Madden was going if she had gotten out of the apartment before Casey and Nuna had come in? Wouldn't you like to know, as Mr. Brandon would have you believe, that no, she wasn't trying to get away. She was just getting ready to go on spring break. She wasn't going to run. She wasn't going to leave. Wouldn't you like to know what she was going to do if Mr. and Nuna hadn't come over there? Was she going to sit there in the living room with her bags packed and the lights out for 2 days? Who could have answered all those questions? This person came. The only other person that was in that room. I do agree that there was difficulty between these two young ladies. I'm not sure, based on the evidence, that it was because of Casey and Nuna. Whatever day that Miss Madden met with the representative from the apartments, the first thing she brought up was not Mr. and Nuna. It was the overages on the utilities. The complaint that Miss Stewart was changing the thermostat up and down. She did mention Mr. and Nuna. And Mr. Brandon would have you believe that the reason that Miss Madden packed up and moved out of the apartment is because Casey and Nuna had taken up residence there. That was his words. In his opening statement, he said, the proof will show you that Casey and Nuna had taken up residence at 321 Raiders Crossing. He testified. He was asked, He admitted being over there, but he said he had only spent the night over there 3, maybe 4 times. Miss Madden tells you he was over there every night, stayed every night. Did you see one stitch of his clothing in that apartment? Did you see one toilet item, a razor, shaving cream, a toothbrush, anything that belonged to KC and them? It is a point of contention that I submit to you doesn't exist. It's a convenience to explain why Miss Madden left and moved out and was living in Corlew. The reason I submit the proof shows that Miss Madden was in Corlew Hall is because that's where the pot-smoking friends lived. That's where she could go be with people she hung around with. Carlicia, Renee Reese, the other individuals over there, and she would go over and they would smoke pot out in the car or maybe at somebody else's place. It was where she could go do what she wanted to do, because the real issue between these roommates was about her use of marijuana in that apartment and the fact that Miss Stewart could lose her scholarship, could be suspended from the basketball team here at tournament time, and had talked to her about it. Now, when Miss Madden was on the witness stand, she said, well, she really didn't seem upset about it at all. When I was smoking pot over there with this other fellow, and she said something about the smell, all she said was, I'm not here. If the coaches come over, just tell them I'm not here. That's how Miss Madden characterized her apparent attitude. But we know from the girls that testified that were on the basketball team that she had discussed it with them. She said, I'm afraid my roommate's going to get me in trouble. She's smoking pot in the apartment. We know that there was an instant where she brought it up with Mr. Anuna when they smelled marijuana being smoked in the apartment. We know that the coaches stressed and stressed and stressed to those athletes, you can't be around people smoking marijuana. It might cause you to fail a drug screen. That was the issue, ladies and gentlemen. And because of that issue is why Miss Madden left, so she could smoke pot with her friends. And she testifies that, no, it was because of Mr. Anunu. No, that really wasn't an issue. And I really wanted to be a good roommate and get along. That's why when she called the police on me, I wanted to go back and tell her how sorry I was that she had to do that. How I wanted to straighten it out and say, let's just all be friends and get along. You remember that? You remember that she testified from this witness stand that after the police officer came up there, and by the way, I'm surprised he still has a job. He should have hauled Miss Madden off to jail and thrown her in a cell down there for having a piece of brown cigar paper that may have had marijuana in it at one time. He should have thrown her under the jail for that. That's what Mr. Brandon says. If you get thrown under the jail for having a piece of cigar paper, good Lord, what happens to you if you commit first-degree murder? You heard Miss Madden say that, yeah, there was a roach there. No, I didn't want to go to jail about it. But when she got through throwing away the trash with that officer and went back up to that apartment, what was the first thing that she did. She marched down that hall to confront Miss Stewart. But she said, oh, I wanted to make things all right. Well, things were all right. Miss Stewart's in her room minding her own business with the door locked. Mr. Brandon wants you to believe that she came out, coming down the hall and trumpeted out in a loud voice, I'm the one that called the police, but that's not what the officer said. The officer said she came out, she either made some motion or said something, but he knew that that's who called the police, and he asked her to go back in her room because he was trying to be discreet. He was trying to leave the impression that somebody had called. And you recall him testifying that I asked Miss Madden, which room are you in? So I would go to that room like I didn't know, so I could be discreet and try not to reveal the person that had called, the snitch, as it were. Because, think, why would he want to do that? Why would he want to do that? Why would a police officer want to do that? That's a real ugly word, snitch. But it's one that people use, especially young people. Snitches get stitches. Maybe the officer was concerned that Miss Stewart would have some difficulty because she had called the police on somebody doing something illegal that jeopardized her status as a student athlete, her scholarship funds, her being able to go to school, her having the ability to graduate and have a college degree, her becoming a success in life. And maybe that officer, based on his experience, was trying to protect her from the very thing that happened in this case. Miss Madden went straight down that hall and she put her hand on the doorknob. Now, this is something I can't, what's that word everybody wants? I can't wrap my mind around it. Why do you put your hand on the doorknob and then knock on the door? She said, oh, you do that so you can feel the twisting to see if the other person's opening the door. You're going to know that in just another second because the doors are going to be open. Doesn't make sense. I submit to you, she put her hand on the door to twist the knob and it was locked and she had to knock. She was going to go in there. That's the only explanation you have for putting your hand on the doorknob. Now, Mr. Brandon said he believes that Miss Stewart had that knife in the room. But what Mr. Brandon believes is not proof in this case. The proof in this case is what you have seen and heard in all these exhibits over here. And you're to base your verdict on that proof. And let's look at it about that knife. Miss Stewart had a knife in her room because A, she was eating in there. No dishes. No food other than a McDonald's sack. Best I recall, they don't give out steak knives in McDonald's when you order a hamburger. No indication that a kitchen knife would be in that room because A, she was eating. Mr. Anunu says she wouldn't let me eat in there. She didn't like people eating there. She didn't want food in her room. She wanted to keep it neat. And when he went over there to eat with her, where did they eat? You saw the little dinette table. That's where they would eat. No proof whatsoever to suggest that the knife would have been on that bed because of somebody eating. And besides that, if you were going to eat, why would you eat on the bed? Why wouldn't you put your plate on the hard surface? You know, even when you have breakfast in bed, they bring a tray. see anything to indicate anybody ate on the bed? No. You can rule that out based on this evidence. Number two, Miss Madden's explanation. When I went into the room, I saw the knife on the bed. I think she may have been cutting something. She told Detective Taylor about being in the room. I knocked on the door and stayed with my hand on the knob. And when she unlocked it, we just argued right after that. Nene, the door was open, so Nene stayed in the room, and she was watching TV and she was texting because she was on the phone. And Tina, I turned and we talked about whatever it was. I turned around and was heading to my room, and I think I kind of bumped into her. And she was like, "Don't bump into me." And she shoved me, and I shoved her back. And she had a knife sitting, I think it was on the bed, because I don't know what she was doing. I think she was cutting something. Okay, you've seen the pictures. You've heard from the police officers that searched that room. You've heard from the crime scene reconstructionist. What was cut in that room? Outside of Tina Stewart, nothing. That doesn't hold water either. Doesn't hold water. But we have to have the knife in the room, because if we don't, you know what we have? Number one, we can't claim self-defense because you brought a weapon into this. And number two, we've got premeditation. We've got somebody that went back there expecting trouble because they were going to start trouble. But Mr. Brandon says, no, that's not it. Miss Stewart was back there, and she had the knife, and you remember when the food didn't work or doesn't work, and when the cutting something doesn't work, Miss Stewart was around the kitchen when the officer came over about the marijuana, Officer Jensen, and she was around the kitchen, so Miss Stewart could have just as easily gotten that knife then. And the reason she got it was because she was scared, because she had snitched, and she got it for her own protection. That's how scared she was. Now wait a minute. Hold on. This Division I athlete, one of only 15 people to get a basketball scholarship, that's a weightlifter, that's 5'7" feet tall, that towers over Miss Madden, she's scared of it? Number two, she goes back to her room and locks the door. And she's in a place of safety, but she takes a knife because she's scared of her. Does that make sense to you? Number three, she's so scared of her that she's armed herself with a knife that she opens a locked door to let her in her room. Does that make sense to you? Or number four, she has a knife because she's so scared of her, she opens the door to let her in her room and she puts a knife on her bed. That's baloney. And let's think about it. Since we've got to get the knife in the room, how do we do it? She just said, or I just read where she told Detective Taylor on the evening, late night of March the 2nd, that when she went in the room, she saw the knife on the bed. Then we've heard another story. I don't know whether it was A, B, C, or D, I can't remember, but another story that somewhere during the struggle, she saw the knife on the bed. We've heard that. Then we've heard another story that as she was on the floor being pounded on her head, on the top of her head, that she reached up on the bed and was just feeling around for anything, and happened to find this knife on the bed. That's what she told her mother. Because, you know, if you see the knife when you go in the room and you know it's there, and then you go to get it, maybe that's premeditation. So I really can't tell that I knew it was there, because that won't look good. And you know, really, if I say I saw it when I went in, no, I have to just say I saw it during the fight. No, I don't even want to say I saw it. I need to tell that I was down on the floor and reaching around to find it. And she was getting whooped so bad that Miss Stewart evidently didn't think she needed the knife. The one that Mr. Brandon says she carried back there for her protection. It's funny that the relative size and strength are such that she's getting whooped so bad that Miss Stewart couldn't get to the knife, evidently. How fortunate. She saw the knife on the bed, but she didn't see that white comforter. That's the biggest article in the room that's on the bed. Was that knife on top of the white comforter or under it? See, ladies and gentlemen, we don't know. But if you're going back there to confront your roommate, who you know is a Division I athlete, who you know is a snitch, who has made you mad, who you're fed up with because you won't smoke pot in your room when you want to, and you go back there and knock on that door because you can't get in and it's open, and the first words out of your mouth are, "Why did you call the police on me?" You don't think there might be some difficulty? Doesn't it make more sense that she went back there armed? Wanted to even it up. And then when she's pushed, if she was pushed, because we don't know. Because here again, we only have Miss Madden to rely on. But she says, at one time, I turned to leave and bumped her. How do you do that? How do you, if this is the doorway, and this door opens, and you're standing here, and there's a conversation, as polite as she would have you believe it is, and you are asked to leave the room, that you turn to leave and bump somebody that's in front of you? How does that happen? And when she realized that it couldn't, she had to leave the bumping out of it. You know? She testified up here, "No, I don't think I bumped her." What if she didn't think she bumped her? Why did she tell the detective that? Maybe it was to explain the fact that Miss Macklin had heard over the phone, "Don't put your hands on me. Don't put your hands on me." And I believe Miss Macklin said that Miss Stewart used an expletive. "Don't put your MF hands on me." Said it twice. "Don't put your hands on me," or "Don't touch me. Don't put your MF hands on me." Get out of here with that. Get out. Leave. Does that sound like somebody wanting to fight, asking you to get out of their room? But now she says she was pushed as she turned to leave. I'd say if anything happened, maybe that's it, but we don't know. But if we do know this, if she was in fact pushed, as she says she was, where was she? She was outside the room. And if she'd gone back there to try to get along with her roommate, when she was asked to leave and pushed out of the room, what does that tell you? "I don't want you in here." And she's out of the room and in the hall. And I don't know if she was pushed in the back because her mother's said she told her she was pushed out of the room and landed in the hall on her back. So I don't know which one of those is true either. But she was maybe pushed out of the room. But in any event, what happened, the key is she was out of the room. She was in a place of safety. She wasn't being attacked. The person had their door locked. They wanted her to leave. They wanted her to leave them alone. And she could have done that, but what did she do? She chose to either turn around and go back into that room, or get up off the floor and go back into that room with what intent? And when you study the self-defense charge that the court has given you, see if she was in a place she had a right to be. I submit to you that she was in Miss Stewart's room, if not at first, at least after having been pushed out, that she did not have a right to be. She was in a person's room who didn't want her in there, and locked the door and asked to be left alone. And then we all know a fight happened. That's the one thing we know. Other than that, I submit that based on what Ms. Madden says, there's a lot that we don't know. She claims that this fight took place at the end of Miss Stewart's bed. You saw, and that's something else I forgot to apologize. I can't draw a circle very well around on that thing, but you can study those exhibits. But she said it happened at the end of the bed. She also told you that when Miss Stewart was stabbed, she was standing up, and it happened at the end of the bed. But and she also told you that when she stabbed her, she reached up or stabbed up. And we know that Miss Stewart towers over. We know that she stabbed right up in this part of the chest area, up near the collarbone, the coastal region number 1 or whatever, the intercoastal region. And there's something else we know, that the wound was down. The wound was down. Now, Mr. Brandon knows that's a problem, I submit to you. And that's why when he was up here during his argument, contrary to what his client told you, he had her bent over, getting pounded in the head at one point. And then at another point, he has Miss Stewart bent over, because that's the only way that you can have a knife wound that's going down. Miss Stewart must have been over. That must have been when she was running forward like a bull towards Miss Madden. I guess that's the explanation. But that's not what Miss Madden told us happened. Said she was standing up, and I just did like that. Ladies and gentlemen, we know, you know, that this did not happen at the foot of that bed. You know it did. You heard Jerry Finley, and he's from Georgia, not Alabama. He might be offended if he knew somebody said he was Alabama. I'm a Tennessee fan. I had to say that. I'm sorry. We know, based on what he said, that Tina Stewart was stabbed over in the area between the desk and that garbage can. We know that a scuffle took place there because the garbage can is turned over. The cup and the McDonald's sack with trash is on the floor there. We know because there is blood spatter downward on the desk and on the wall. And he explained to you how you can tell the direction. And he told you that it had to be higher. And you can look at it on the desk. You can see how high off the floor it is. We also know that there's impact staining on the McDonald's sack. And his explanation is that Tina Stewart had blood in her mouth Think about it, blood in her mouth from having, I submit to you, her aorta puncture, bleeding, and also her lung, and when you breathe in and breathe out, you would be sucking the blood up into your mouth. And that at one point she spit that blood out, and that's why that sack's there. And then he also talked about other spatter on the garbage can going down, and also there on the floor. And he said that based on his analysis of those blood stains and those blood patterns, that is where Tina Stewart received the fatal stab wound. Because the other wounds would not have bled that much. And that she fell on the floor in the area of the end of the bed, the big blood pool. So what does that tell you? I submit that tells you that she was standing up in that area when she received the blow, the fatal stab to her chest. And I also believe it's consistent with somebody wielding a knife overhanded, right-handed person wielding the knife overhanded and stabbing the person right here that she's facing. Call 911, she's got a knife. Call 911, she's got a knife. Who would she be hollering that to? Obviously, she can't call 911. Obviously, Miss Madden's not going to call 911. Who else is in the apartment? She knows that Miss Renee Reese is in that apartment, and she is hollering for help. Miss Reese called 911. She didn't know her name. Didn't know her name. Call 911. She's got a knife. My heart's still beating. Stop, stop. Now, Miss Madden's told you that she is the one that said that. And the reason she said that is not because she's being pounded on the head, but because her heart was beating like it was about to jump out of her chest. Does that make sense to you? Does that make sense that if you're getting pounded on the head, you would holler, "Stop, my heart's still beating"? Or is that more consistent with somebody that's had a knife stuck in the area of their heart? Begging, stop, stop. And here's something else. Don't take my word for this. I want you to look at these autopsy reports. They're exhibits 20A and 20B. Mr. Brandon wants you to believe that there's only one stab wound. And the reason he wants you to believe that is because that's the only way he can make his client's story consistent. That there's only one stab wound because she testified only stabbed at one time. And so he goes into a great deal of detail to tell you that it's longer than it is deep, whatever. And you heard him cross-examine Dr. McMaster, and she explained that that's a general wound. Every wound, with the exception of the wound on Miss Stewart's arm, is described in this autopsy report as a stab wound. Now, I can't help it that Miss Madden wasn't effective with when she was stabbing, as far as getting it into the back of the neck or the head, or getting it into the back of the shoulder. Maybe the knife blade was bent at that point. I don't know. I wasn't there. But she was effective enough to kill her. And then if you want to buy Mr. Brandon's argument that no, these aren't stab wounds, these are cuts, why'd she have to cut her 3 more times? When did she tell you on that witness stand how she cut her 3 more times? You know the answer to that question? I'm sorry. I wish it hadn't happened. I wish I'd called for help. The one that could have answered that question refused to do it. And you can take her version, where she stabs her 1 time and Miss Stewart falls at the end of the bed, and Mr. Newman is exactly right. If you want to take that version, then she had to stab her or cut her or whatever it is that caused those holes in her body by a knife, possibly indicated serrated blade, which we know is consistent, that she was on the ground bleeding at that time, bleeding to death, and that she stabbed her or cut her 3 more times. And if you don't want to accept that story, then is that not consistent with somebody over next to that desk that's been fatally stabbed in the chest, hollering, call 911, my heart's still beating, stop, stop, turning and I turned the wrong way, turning and trying to get away from her and being wounded here, here, and on this arm? As she's spitting blood out of her mouth. But the knife only went in there 2 inches. It really wasn't that hard of a lick. If she'd been trying to kill her, she would have stuck it a lot further in. Miss Madden, who'd never been in a fight before, knew just exactly how hard you had to hit to make it go just 2 inches. Does that make any sense to you? He wants to minimize it because she only stuck it in there 2 inches. Okay, fine. She didn't stab her as hard as she could. She really didn't want to kill her. She just wanted to kind of wing her, as they say. That's why she shut the door and turned off the light. She's just trying to get her off of it. Think about that. When she had the opportunity upon leaving that room with a bloody knife that was broken, when she had an opportunity to say, Miss Reeves, Renee, call for help. Renee says, what happened? Oh, she cut me on the arm. When she had the opportunity to say, I'm sorry, we were in a fight, I found this knife, I used it, I think I stabbed her. When she had the first opportunity to do that, what did she do? She told a lie. What else had she done at that point? She had wiped her hands and the knife on the Tinkerbell blanket. And being concerned for Miss Stewart like she was, and being in a mental state that she didn't know what to do, she just happened to luck up and find a clear plastic bag to put that bloody Tinkerbell blanket and that broken knife with Miss Stewart's blood on it into that clear plastic bag. And depending on who you believe, Miss Reese said, no, I didn't touch it. Miss Madden says, yes, I gave it to her. What difference does that make, really? Somehow it got in a dumpster and we know Miss Reese didn't put it there. Who could tell us about that? Miss Madden, but she refused to do that. What else did she do? She found the 2 knives that matched it. The 2 knives that matched it, because if a knife was found that matched it, that could implicate her in something since it was in that apartment. If that knife was never found, that makes the man with dreadlocks in play. If those matching knives were never found, that lets her concoct another story. But she forgot the one in the dishwasher. And then what else did she do? She took Miss Stewart's jacket, the one that had all the blood on it, and then the bra. Can't answer that question. Did you hear Miss Madden tell you that Miss Stewart had her by the shirt or the bra and was slinging her around the room, or was that something Mr. Brandon said? Miss Madden had the opportunity to tell you that. Did you ever hear any one word about I was grabbed in the chest and slung around by my shirt or my bra? Did you ever hear any testimony from Miss Madden about that? Not at all. The only thing we heard was she was pushed and pounded in the head. Now, I don't mean to make light of this, but Miss Madden used her bra as a storage bin. She put things in it. She had cigars in it. She had Miss Stewart's cell phone in it. She had her cell phone in it. She had her iPod in it. She had her earphones in it with her iPod. She put a cigarette lighter in there, I guess for the blunts or the cigarillos or whatever. And if there's any doubt in your mind from the fact that she had all that in her bra, you watched her on tape, and when Detective Taylor gave her his card, what did she do with it? Put it in her bra. So yes, it's pretty unreasonable for me to suggest to you that maybe she got a knife and stuck in there. And Mr. Brandon says, well, where's all the pictures of her breast being all cut up from where she stuck a knife down in there? Well, obviously, if there was one, it would have been introduced. But I would say when you're using that as a receptacle for a knife, you'd be kind of careful about how you put it in there. And did it tear when she reached in there to go after the knife? I don't know. But I know it's just as reasonable to say that as it is to say that it was torn during a fight when the defendant doesn't even say that. Do you remember Officer English? I believe it, no, might have been Officer Knox. When she was there with Miss Madden and they were either taking pictures or doing something or getting the stuff out of her bra, but one of the officers said, oh, did that happen tonight? Do you remember? And she looked around at her pants and other stuff, her shirt and her pants and other, and then she looked at her bra and said, oh yeah. And Officer English testified, I felt like I had, suggested the answer to her. Do you remember that? And we know that that's possible because we saw when Detective Taylor gave her an out by suggesting, look, maybe this was a struggle, maybe, it got out of hand or something. That's when all this self-defense came out, when the man with the dreadlocks he was long gone by then, and we have to come up with a new story. She went right along with what Detective Taylor fed to. And Mr. Brandon says she wasn't going to leave, but yet she packed her clothes. Said she stopped when the police hollered, but she was hiding under a car. That was because Mr. Anuna was after her, but she had already called somebody to come pick her up. She had lied to everybody. To Renee Reese, to Carlisha, lied to her mother on 2 occasions, lied to Mr. Anunu, she's not here, had sent out text messages to disguise the fact that Miss Stewart was in 321B in the dark, bleeding to death. And if I can keep anybody from finding her until I can get out of here, maybe I can get away with this. Totally inconsistent with any claim of self-defense. Totally inconsistent. And if you had any doubt that she did not intentionally act, why did she leave her there to bleed to death? And why did she go back to check on her? And she made a big point to say, I didn't touch her. But she was still, wasn't moving. And she says she lied to Mr. Anunu so he wouldn't be upset by finding her that way. Didn't want him to be upset by having to see her that way. I'm glad that she felt so sorry for Mr. Anunu that she wanted to protect his feelings. Ladies and gentlemen, perhaps some of the only things that Mr. Brandon and the state agree on is that this is not a case of negligent homicide. This is not a case of reckless homicide. And if you think about it, the judge didn't tell you that either one of those offenses required either an intentional or knowing act. They are non-specific intent offenses. In other words, you have no intent, but you cause injury or death as a result of your reckless or criminally negligent act. And I submit those don't apply here. Even if you accept the theory that Miss Madden in some way acted in self-defense, she told you she meant to stab, meant to. That can't be reckless. That's not negligent. Those don't apply. And we talked about this on Tuesday of last week when we were selecting the jury. And I told you that the court is obligated to charge all lesser included offenses. Obligated. But those don't apply. And then Mr. Brandon tells you that it can't be manslaughter. I'm going to agree with him on that too. Person commits voluntary manslaughter when the defendant unlawfully killed the alleged victim. That's happened. The defendant acted knowingly. We know that she told you. She knew she had the knife. She pushed it out at her. She was trying to stop her. She wanted to hurt her. We know that much at least. We know that was a knowing act. And the killing resulted from a state of passion. Now, you might find, contrary to Miss Madden's testimony, you might find that she was mad, in a state of passion. She said she wasn't, but maybe you don't believe her, I don't know. She said she went back there to be a peacemaker, make everything okay. But she might be mad because the police had been called on her. So she might have been in some type of passion. But now get this. Produced by adequate provocation. Adequate provocation. Is it adequate provocation to go kill somebody because you called the police about an illegal act and reported that this is the person that's doing it? Do you want to be killed by somebody if you report an illegal act? Is that adequate provocation? I submit to you that to lead a reasonable person to act in an irrational manner. And you've heard the court tell you in its instructions in first-degree murder that a person in a state of passion can, if they can, sufficiently premeditate, that even though they're mad at the time, it's first-degree murder. You know, if you think about it, your common sense tells you that when somebody kills somebody, most time they're mad at them. Don't like them. They've done something to make them mad at them. And the distinction is that it has to be an adequate provocation. It's not manslaughter either. And then first and second degree murder, and the difference there is the intentional act as opposed to the knowing act, but both require a mental element, and the premeditation. I submit that the proof shows it was a premeditated act. She went back there, she had something on her mind, and it wasn't to make peace. We submit that there's no proof the knife was in Miss Stewart's room. She had to carry it in there. Obviously, if you arm yourself, you're thinking, I'm going to use this weapon. And then what else is there to indicate premeditation? That once she stabbed her, and once the call 911, she's got a knife. Stop. My heart's still beating. Once that had been said, obviously she's off of her. What does she continue to do? Try to stab her more. That shows an intent. That shows a premeditation. And once she is completely disabled, once she is completely immobilized, once she is on the floor with her lifeblood leaking out of her, what does Miss Madden do? Turns out the light and shuts the door. Intention. It shows that what she was letting happen was what she meant to happen and what she had planned to happen. And as much as she wants to say, I don't remember taking her phone so she couldn't call anybody. I don't remember taking the knives and throwing them in the dumpster with the bloody clothes. I don't remember sending text messages to cover up what had happened. As much as she wants to say that, ladies and gentlemen, if you'll look, it was a cool and calculated steps that she took to try to avoid detection, to try to evade arrest, to try to get away. You saw her on that witness stand, and you saw her in that police station. And I'm going to agree with something she said. That wasn't me. That wasn't her Saturday on that witness stand. That wasn't her. What you saw in that tape was her. Somebody who was cool, calculated, unemotional. And it's telling. What did she ask about? When do I get to make a phone call? When do I get to go home? What will my bond be? Will I get to go on spring break? Not, I wish I'd killed myself. Not, I feel sorry for her parents. Not, I wished I'd called for help. Not, she'd be alive if I'd helped her. Not any of that. Only concerned with number one. And what I submit, based on your observations of her demeanor on Saturday, was an act to gain sympathy. She has gone into yet another false, trying to give another false impression about what really happened in this case and what she's really concerned about and who she's really concerned about. And I'm going to touch on one final thing, then I'm going to sit down. I know y'all will be glad about that. But Mr. Brandon says, and what I submit to you is a desperate attempt to get you not to find her guilty of destruction of evidence. He says that Detective Taylor's investigation didn't start until he got there. Did you hear the judge tell you anything about Detective Taylor's investigation? He said, well, she can't be guilty of that because when Detective Taylor got there, she was already in handcuffs. Wouldn't that indicate to you that it's been some kind of investigation if she's in cuffs? Does it make sense to you that the legislature would pass a law that says you can destroy evidence, you can tamper with evidence, you can conceal or hide evidence, as long as it's before Detective Taylor shows up? As long as it's before any of the police show up? Ladies and gentlemen, you take a knife, you stick it in 2 inches, 10 inches, ever how deep in somebody's chest, and they fall to the ground, you shut the door and turn out the light and let them bleed to death, and you're going to leave? Do you not know that the police are going to want to know what happened when that body's found? There was an investigation, all right. It might not have led to an indictment or an arrest warrant or a trial, but there was going to be an investigation. And Renee Reese is gone and you don't know where she is? You know, Mr. Brandon, I guess I told you a story because I'm going to touch on something else. Mr. Brandon said Renee Reese did this. Renee Reese didn't call 911. You know what else Renee Reese didn't do? She didn't stab anybody. Now, as bad as you want to make her to be for not calling 911, as bad as you want to make her to be for running out of that apartment, as bad as you think she is, if you do, for smoking marijuana, who was she with? She wasn't with Tina Stewart. She was Miss Madden's friend. She had just seen or heard an altercation. She had just seen Tina Stewart laying on the floor. She could see her leg. She knew something bad had happened. She was so scared she locked herself in the room, and the woman comes out of the room with a broken knife with blood all over her. And she says, "Don't tell anybody anything." Now, I fault Renee Reese for not calling 911, but it makes more sense when you've seen or think you've seen or know what's happened, that your friend has just killed somebody because the police had been called and you were up there smoking marijuana with her, and that's the problem. When she's handing you bloody clothes and a knife and saying, "Here, take this, get rid of it. Don't tell anybody." When she calls you and says, "Where'd you go? Who have you been talking to? What are you doing?" When she shows up over at Woodfin's funeral home wanting to get in a car with you and you're trying to get away. I fought Renee Reese, but I understand it. And this stuff about she locked herself in the room because Tina Stewart was coming after her, that's hogwash. Who's testified? Who testified that they heard Tina Stewart say, "Where's your little friend? I'm going to whoop her too"? That's baloney. I mentioned yesterday was Mother's Day. You all know there are two mothers in this courtroom that are involved in this trial. You know there are two mothers in this courtroom that have had their hearts broken. And you know that you have sympathy for both of them. And when Miss Madden's mother testified the other day, and she said, "I sincerely want to say how sorry I am," you know that was the truth. You know it was. I want to express how sorry I am to Miss Stewart's family. And you know that she will blame herself for what's happened. She didn't come right out and say it, but she did too. That was a real person. That was a person with feelings. And what I want you to do, ladies and gentlemen, is you can have sympathy, but you cannot let sympathy obscure the facts and the law in this case. You just can't. The judge has instructed you that you can't, and as bad as you feel for Mr. and Miss Madden, that their daughter is in this situation, they can do the same thing that you've done. They still get to look at her. They still get to talk to her. The Jacksons don't have that option. Miss Madden's not here because of something her mother did or something her father did. She's not here because of something Tina Stewart did. She is here because of what she chose to do. Here because she's an adult. She's a college student, albeit young. Mr. Brandon wants to make her 17, but she's not. She had been living on her own for 10 months or so. She is here because she wanted to use marijuana and got mad when her roommate complained about it and decided to get even. She is here because this is not a case of self-defense where she acted and immediately called the police and say it was a fight, it got out of hand, and here's the truth of it. She is here because she has lied and lied and lied and lied and lied. She is here because Casey and Nuna was smart enough to know something was wrong and show up over there and make her run a little bit before she was ready. She's here because as sorry as Renee Reese is, as sorry as Nene is, as sorry as the person that Miss Madden did not want the police to know about is, at some point she chose to call 911. And the police went to that apartment to see Miss Madden running away. That's why she's here. And as hard as it is to think or believe that a young person could do this, we know it's so. We know it's so because we've heard about it over these last few days. Sometimes the toughest decisions in life that you have to make are the right ones. If you've got children and never spanked one of them, that's one of the toughest decisions you have to make. But you do it because you know it's right. If you don't believe in spanking, stand them in the corner, put them in their room, ground them. You do it because you know it's right. As much as it hurts you, you know it's the right thing to do. And so I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, make the tough decision in this case. As much as you know that it may hurt Mr. and Miss Madden, as much as you know it may hurt Shanterrica Madden, you know that based on the evidence and the law in this case, that the right decision is that she is guilty of first-degree murder. I'm asking you to make that tough decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitesell. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about how we're going to handle